I had not meant to stand so near the fire, nor to look at him at all. Montfort House was a hive that night. Bees in silk and satin, the hum of violins, the soft clink of glass at the far end of the drawing room. Lady Beatrice, my charge, sat in a bergère opposite the hearth, her profile like a wax seal newly pressed. Delicate, perfect, cooling. I hovered at her elbow to keep the embers from spotting her pelisse, a companion's post of invisibility. My gloves were too thin for the heat. The air tasted of oranges and beeswax. His Grace of Ravenshire came to speak to her. Of course he did. All London expected it. And in the press of guests, he drew for a moment to the mantel, his shoulder nearly brushing mine. The carved griffins above the grate stared like judges. A log collapsed with a sigh. The music shifted to a Scottish air. "Miss Ashdown," he said, too low for the nearest dowager and perfectly clear to me. "Do not look at me just now." I did look. His gaze was fixed beyond me, toward Beatrice, toward duty and a fortune tied with maternal ribbons. But his voice, I could feel the warmth of it at my temple, as if the fire had climbed from the grate and learned to speak. I had known him as one knows a portrait. Raven black hair, profile stamped with history, a mouth made for edicts and acquiescence. He was flesh here, not oil and varnish. The clean starch of his cravat grazed my sleeve. "Your lips," he said, the words almost soundless, "are my ruin." My breath went. I thought he had mistaken me, that he spoke to someone else, some siren tucked half behind the screen. But there was no one between us and the mantelpiece griffins. No one but me and the flame's appetite. Across the room, Beatrice laughed at something her mother said. The Marchioness's fan struck her glove with a soft reprimand, a signal meant for the Duke, perhaps, to return. Now. A gentleman's cough rose behind us. Cards changed hands. The fiddles scraped into a country dance. "I beg!" The plea snagged in my throat. I turned as if to adjust Beatrice's shawl and knocked the tongs so that they struck the fender with a bright, traitorous note. Beatrice's blue eyes slid toward the hearth. His Grace had already straightened. The line of duty redrew itself along his shoulders. His hand, those infamous Stratton hands that held estates and expectations, fell to his side. "Your shawl, my lady," I murmured to Beatrice, my face hot as the coals. "Thank you, Charlotte." She smiled, innocent. "Is the fire too strong?" "Only a little." I tried not to look at him again. I failed. Our glances met like two skaters glancing off a thin place on the Serpentine. He did not flush. Dukes do not blush. But I saw a flicker in that controlled gaze, as if something had chafed under all that nobility, and was at last making itself known. Nan the housemaid slipped behind me with a new decanter. Her eye caught mine, quick, canny, and then flitted away. The Marchioness rose, all rustle and authority. "Alexander," she said with a smile that set London in order, "Lady Jersey will not be kept waiting." "Of course, ma'am." He bowed to Beatrice, and to me a fraction, less, as any gentleman might, to an employee. The rules were as tidy as the brass fender. Only my heart was ill-ordered. I fled on the pretext of summoning Beatrice's carriage. The corridor was cooler, dimmer, a strip of ink beside the bright page of the drawing room. I leaned my forehead against the pane and watched the rain stipple Montfort House's steps. The glass fogged. I thought of my father's debts, of the pawned brooch that had been Mamma's, of how easily men made ruin of other people's lives with a pen. I vowed, then and there, to be a shadow. Shadows cannot be ruined. They already belong to the dark. "Miss Ashdown." The voice behind me was not the Duke's. Mr. Finch, Ravenshire's secretary, a grave, neat man, stood with a silver salver and an expression that never seemed to do more than register the weather. By his Grace's request. A card lay on the tray, cream and precise, the Stratton crest winking in the candle flame. My glove shook as I took it. The card was only a calling card. No billet, no enigma. But beneath his engraved name, someone had written two words in a hand I had seen before in Charity's ledgers, and the note sent to Almac's patronesses. "Forgive me." A door opened at the corridor's end. The Marchioness's step approached, the measured tread of a general. I slid the card into the lining of my reticule as if it burned. Behind me, in the drawing room, the musicians struck the first bars of a waltz. I had danced it once before my father's fall, when I had still been allowed to be young. The edge of the card pressed my palm through the satin like a brand. "Miss Ashdown?" The Marchioness's figure trimmed the doorway, fan shut like a blade. "Lady Beatrice requires you." "Yes, my lady." My voice sounded almost like mine. I turned from the cold glass to the fire's world and the faces waiting there, and collided, chest to chest, with Ravenshire himself as he stepped out. His eyes widened the smallest fraction. For a heartbeat, we were only two mortal creatures caught in the wrong doorway. "Tomorrow," he breathed, barely sound at all. "At 11. "Your Grace," I began, weaponless, reckless. He glanced over my shoulder at the Marchioness and was gone into the blaze of company, leaving the scent of winter air and something like cedar. The Marchioness's fan tapped my wrist. Do not loiter in passages, Miss Ashdown. It provokes comment. Yes, my lady. But I held the card like a secret verdict, and when Beatrice said, Charlotte, do say that Nan fetches my police, the word tomorrow pulsed in my hand like a second pulse. At 11? Where? For what? And how, in heaven's name, was I to survive it when his fiancée sat across the room still, like a perfect seal cooling? I slept little. The fire in the grate had burned to a faint red eye, watching me through the hours. When dawn ribbed the sky over Mayfair, I rose and stitched resolve into the seams of my dress. I would be what I had been hired to be, a shadow with a steady hand. By breakfast, the Marchioness had lists. Lady Beatrice's calls, Miss Ashdown. You will write the notes, my daughter's hand tires. Be exact in the hours. She slid a stack of embossed stationery toward me, the Montfort crest pressed as hard as her will. And take this. Lady Harbury's Ladies' Relief subscription. His Grace attends to such matters. Convey our assent. There was the opening. Clean, respectable. The Duke's tomorrow at 11 had not specified a place, but the Montfort household had. A companion may carry subscriptions and thank you notes without calling scandal to heel. I penned the phrases that keep society oiled. My mother desires me to say, we are excessively obliged. The season is quite diverted by the fetes. The nib scratched like a cricket, cheerful and pitiless. Beatrice yawned and picked up a novel she would not finish. Every few lines she sighed, a pleasant sigh, the kind that had men lifting their heads like hounds scenting spring. Charlotte, she said at last, casting the book aside, do you suppose I shall like being a duchess? Very much, my lady, if you like being yourself at the same time, I said, then hated the daring of it. She laughed, delighted. Oh, you are a blue stocking in disguise. Mamma says a duchess is best liked who is liked by everybody. His Grace is respected, I offered. Neutral ground. Respected, she repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar sweet. He is very serious. Sometimes I think he reads newspapers inside his head even at a ball. Do you find him handsome? I blotted a comma too fiercely. He is considered so. And by you? She teased, not malicious. The tongs chimed in my memory. I steadied my voice. He is my employer's intended and a duke. A companion's answer, a shadow's boundary. At 11:15, the Marchioness dispatched me with the relief subscription, directions to his Grace's solicitor, and a caution. Walk. The day is fine. Do not be seen, pausing. And Miss Ashdown, if you should meet acquaintances, remember your place? I did not have acquaintances to remember. Nan slipped me a look as I took my police, half sympathy, half warning. Outside, the air carried that fresh London brightness that comes before noon, when the streets are swept and the hawkers have not yet grown hoarse. I crossed Grosvenor Square, then St. James's. Gentlemen clattered past in curricles. A milliner's girl held aloft a hat-box like an offering. The hour told from St. George's. 11. Ravenshire's townhouse kept to the discreet corner near the park, its stone taut as a jaw. Mr. Finch admitted me himself. Miss Ashdown, he said, inclining. This way. His Grace has reserved a quarter hour. Reserved, as if it were a chair at a rout. The library was high and cool, a room that seemed to breathe hush. No fire burned. Only daylight lay along the spines like fine dust. He stood beside a table scattered with papers and a small parcel wrapped in blue paper. He did not bow quite fully. Miss Ashdown, your Grace. My voice betrayed nothing. I had practiced being empty all morning. I wronged you last night. He spoke without preface. The words clipped, as if each cost a sovereign, an impulse, unpardonable. Men often forgive themselves for those. I had not meant to say it aloud. I was a poor steward of silence. A corner of his mouth twitched. Not amusement, exactly. Recognition. I ask your pardon, then. The impulse and the words. I accept your apology. We might have left it there, two statues exchanging an inscription, but the room contained us and our breath and the parcel on the table, and a sentence that had not stopped sounding in my head all night. Also, he said, clearing his throat, the relief subscription. I am, obliged to Lady Kincardine. If you will, he gestured. Business drew its neutral veil between us. I passed him Beatrice's neat assent. His fingers brushed mine briefly, blue veins shifting beneath his wrist's immaculate linen. He signed his name with that decisive hand. Mr. Finch, he called, and the secretary appeared, his presence always arriving like a period at the end of a sentence. See this to Harbury's committee. When we were alone, again he hesitated. The solemn man wavered, just for a heartbeat, as if another tide pulled at him. You must not be the ruin of anything, I said, meaning to save him, to save myself, to save Beatrice, whom I liked and had sworn to serve. His gaze lifted to mine as if I had offered a challenge. I mean to be the repair of many things, he said, and the softest roughness crept into his voice. Beginning with that, he pushed the small blue parcel toward me. For Lady Beatrice, he added, with impeccable propriety. A token. My mother's reset. Will you deliver it? Of course, I said, relieved and oddly bereft. I tucked the parcel into my reticule, feeling its quiet weight beside the hidden card. We walked to the door like strangers, finishing a minuet. Correct step, correct turn. At the threshold, he paused. Outside, hooves rang like small hammers. A boy whistled a rude tune. Miss Ashdown, he said very low. We shall see one another in the park, doubtless. The Montfort carriage goes every fine afternoon, I answered, steady. Then until the park. Mr. Finch coughed. I curtsied and went out. By 3, Beatrice and I rolled along the row, our ribbons behaving with proper interest. The season had spilled itself here. Dandies, dowagers, dogs, repairs to reputations in every nod. Lady Jersey in her carriage, a pair of my officers, the prince's set going by like a painted procession. Beatrice waved. The Marchioness counted bows like coin. We had not gone 30 yards more when a curricle darted in too close, its driver reckless. The horses shied. Our coachman swore. The wheel hit a rut hard enough to lift me from the seat. The world swerved. Trees, sky, the pale oval of Beatrice's alarm. "Charlotte!" she cried, grabbing my sleeve. The strap tore. The door lurched. And I pitched forward, helpless, toward the churned gravel of Hyde Park, straight into the path of a dark gelding whose rider was already leaping from the saddle, his coat a sweep of black against the bright afternoon. Air, gravel, sky, everything turned in a blue-green whirl and ended in the firm reality of a man's arm. I struck against a waistcoat, my palms scraping wool, and heard the horse snort so close I could feel the heat of its flank. My bonnet skewed. Pins bit my scalp. "I have you," he said. Ravenshire's voice. Gravel chewed under his boots as he set me right, his hands hard and careful at my elbows. Easy. The world snapped back into its separate pieces. The row with its parade of eyes, Beatrice's frightened face at the carriage window, the Marchioness half risen, a footman leaping down, dandies craning like herons. The driver of the offending curricle flourished his whip in apology and speeded on, pursued by oaths. "Miss Ashdown," Beatrice cried. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing broken, my lady." I sounded brisk. I was made of trembling. The scent of crushed turf rose like a tonic. A groom had caught Ravenshire's gelding. Its dark neck shook, scattering bright foam. The Duke's hands fell away but left the knowledge of them. "You are certain?" he asked, pitched for me alone. "Quite. Only my pride." "Then let us rescue that as well." He offered his arm with the exact degree of formality the row required. The ondits began to fly even so. "Who? The Montfort companion?" And I felt the weight of each glance like shot sewn into my hem. He handed me into the carriage himself, bowing to Beatrice and the Marchioness with ducal calm. "Pray forgive the disturbance, Lady Kincardine. The row grows more hazardous by the hour." "The row," said the Marchioness, cool as cut glass, "is as it always has been. It is the people who run in it who change." Ravenshire's mouth tightened. He touched his hat and stepped back. Then, while the footman fussed with the torn strap, drew near my side of the coach as if to adjust the door. "A word," he said, low, without moving his lips. At the rail, the coachman climbed down to see to the sprung hinge. For a moment, the carriage was a small island of confusion, perfectly useful to privacy. I took 2 steps away, my gloves in a death grip. "Someone writes to me," he said, eyes fixed on the wheel, "about my brother." The row faded to a hum. Lord Julian, gone these 7 years, the lake at Ravenshire Hall holding its silence. I had heard the story as everyone had. A summer evening, a boat overturned, a young lord lost, a family made grave. What do they write? The question came without permission. That they know it was not an accident. His breath clouded. The day had sharpened. That I am to pay for their continued ignorance. The note came among Lady Beatrice's invitations. Clever. If anything is to be found of a second letter, Miss Ashdown, it will be in her escritoire, and I cannot ask her. Her mother would smell blood. And if you do not pay, they will say I was not where I said I was, that there was a quarrel. That, he broke off. Duty wore through him like a wire. "You were a boy," I said. "I was a brother," he returned. A groom straightened from the hinge. The coachman called something about a washer. The Marchioness watched us with that unblinking calm which passes for benevolence in great houses. We had seconds. I was a shadow. I had promised myself that. But a shadow could move where lamps could not. "I will sort the invitations," I said, pulse loud. "I am forever sorting what other people drop. If there is a letter, I will find it." His gaze seized on mine with a gratitude so fierce it almost scorched. "I ask too much." "You ask the only person who could not possibly profit by your ruin," I said, and did not immediately regret it. "Tonight," he said, so softly the words vibrated more than sounded. "Vauxhall. There will be a masquerade. Everyone will be masked anyway. Box 13, the outer walk at 11. Safer than a call here. Bring whatever you find. Mr. Finch will see you safely as far as the gate." "Vauxhall?" I breathed. Lanterns and shadows. Slips of paper are bolder in the dark, unless you think it foolish. I think it necessary. Beatrice leaned out. Charlotte, will it hold? I shall die if we are set down like beggars. It will hold, my lady, I said, though my knees did not. The hinge was secured. We rolled on. I kept my gaze modestly lowered, but could feel Ravenshire riding a little behind, a sentinel shadow. By the time we returned to Grosvenor Square, my gloves had dried with sweat. Beatrice flew upstairs to choose a new ribbon. The Marchioness retired to compose a reprimand to our coachman. I went directly to the morning room where Beatrice's escritoire waited, all rosewood elegance and secrets. The key lay in its usual porcelain dish. Beatrice was not a creature of locks. I slid open the shallow drawer first. Dance cards like pressed flowers, a dried violet, a small sketch of a spaniel. I breathed slower. The second drawer held invitations tied in green silk, notes of compliment, 2 cards from Almack's with the patroness's crabbed hand. The third, my fingers pricked, a square of paper unsealed, as if meant to appear merely mislaid. The wafer had broken, but a crescent of dark red wax clung to the corner. In it, the faintest bite of a signet, only the tail of a letter, an S perhaps, cut off. I unfolded it. 3 lines, written in a small, precise hand. The lake keeps poor counsel. Gold purchases silence at better rates. Deposit as before. Ledger mark O. And no word need trouble a fiancé's ear. Midnight suits Vauxhall. I stared until the words tipped into symbols. What? O-S? Oh, someone. The final line burned. My throat went tight. Footsteps crossed the hall. The Marchioness's voice. Miss Ashdown, I had no right to touch this paper. I had every duty to do so. I slid the note into my sleeve and closed the drawer gently, as if it were a lid on living flame. Miss Ashdown? Closer now. I turned, composing my face. My lady? Lady Beatrice desires fresh flowers for her hair for Vauxhall this evening. We are to attend the fireworks. She paused. Do you disapprove? Never allowed, I said before I could stop myself. Her brow arched. I shall send for the flowers, I amended, and felt the crisp shape of the blackmail note against my skin as if it were a blade. Vauxhall, midnight, masks and music. And in my sleeve, a demand that named a ledger mark and a lake. Lanterns swung like small moons from the trees, and the air smelled of roast ham and damp leaves. Vauxhall turned London into a dream, with pockets for secrets. Fiddles worried at a tune. Laughter rose in errant bubbles. Couples blurred along the dark walk like ink spilt on silk. I wore a plain black domino and a half mask Nan had sewn with ribbon from a retired bonnet. You look like a sensible ghost, she said, tying the bow with hands unaccountably gentle. Keep to the light when you can, unless you mean not to. She slipped a shawl about my shoulders as if clothing me against weather and the world alike. The Montfort party took a box. Near the orchestra, the Marchioness perfectly visible in dove gray, Beatrice a bellflower in pale blue. Ravenshire arrived with Lady Honoria. He bowed to our box as a duke must, and then was claimed by 3 men who spoke in earnest behind their fans of conversation. Mr. Finch, discreet as punctuation, hovered and then vanished. My heart struck the measure of the band. At 5 minutes to 11, I excused myself under the pretext of seeking a syllabub. The dark walk was a net of shadow. Laughter snagged and tore. I counted lanterns to the 13th box on the outer walk and found it, unclaimed save for a gentleman in a dark domino, whose height and stillness announced him to me before anything else did. This is folly, I said, because naming a thing sometimes reduces it, not if it keeps Beatrice from harm, he said. The mask made his voice strange, plainer, almost vulnerable. I slid the note from my sleeve. He took it with gloved fingers and read in a quick, silent sweep. The little pause at the lake changed the air between us. He knows, he said softly, or believes he knows. The ledger mark. Oh, does it signify anything to you? He turned the paper over. The wafer's crescent of wax caught the lantern glow. The seal is broken. Only a tail of an S remains. He lifted the scrap to the light, very close. This is old wax, he murmured. And the paper, watermarked. Montrose and Copar, our steward uses this for estate accounts. He looked at me then. There is a ledger at my uncle's rooms in Brook Street. Old investments, receipts. I was not given to see them when I came of age. He said they were trifles. There may be a mark, OS, against payments. Your uncle, I said carefully, is Lord Oswald Stratton. He is. Not denial, not concession, only a fact placed. Between us like a knife, point down. A muffled cheer went up as a troop of acrobats formed a human tower beyond the trees. The world felt very far and very near. I put my hand on the table to appear at ease and felt, under my palm, a little grain of wax. I lifted it. Not a grain, a sliver, hardened, with the ghost of an impression I could not read. This fell from the note, I said. Keep it, he answered, in case the shape helps us later. We stood so close that when a breeze moved the lanterns, the light slid from his cheek to mine. I was where I said I was, he said, as if speaking to the note rather than to me. The night Julian died, but I was not where I should have been. A truth offered without ornament. Where should you have been? I asked, the question trembling like a string. With him, he said. I swallowed. Then whoever writes this strikes at guilt that needs no help. Yes. He folded the note once again. I will not buy their silence. Then we must make their speech cost them more than it costs you. My voice surprised us both. Find the ledger. Learn what OS buys. And I glanced toward the bright core of the gardens where Beatrice laughed at something two officers said. Keep the bride safe while we gut the wedding of its usefulness. His head turned. His profile was a medallion in lantern light. You would gut a wedding? I would spare a girl a lifetime of being useful to other people. He made a sound, perhaps the beginning of a laugh, perhaps of a vow. Miss Ashdown, Charlotte, do not, I whispered, because my name in that voice would undo me faster than any scandal. Footsteps scuffed, voices darted. A couple blundered close, masks askew, and then veered away. We must part, he said, and it felt like an amputation. Take the note, I told him. I copied the words. He tucked it inside his coat with a motion that looked very like a man putting something near his heart. Miss Ashdown, came a voice sharp enough to sever silk. The Marchioness at the walk's edge, her mask abandoned for clarity. Are you lost? Not in the least, my lady, I said, willing my pulse into invisibility. I came to admire the lanterns. The lanterns can be admired from our box. Her gaze slid to the dark domino beside me and away with a medicinal coolness that cured nothing. Lady Beatrice requires you. I am at your service. Ravenshire had already melted into shadow. Only a breath of winter remained. Back in the box, Beatrice seized my hand. Charlotte, did you see? They are to have fireworks. Mama says we must not stay late, but one rocket surely, she whispered, as if confessing theft. Mama says the wedding should be sooner. She fears gossip, that silly spill in the park. But sooner sounds like a bell that is ringing for someone else. How much sooner? I kept my voice mild, though something iron settled in my stomach. A fortnight, the Marchioness said, overhearing what she was meant to. We shall remove to Ravenshire Hall in 2 days to finalize arrangements. Lord Kincardine will join us. Miss Ashdown, you will attend Lady Beatrice. The first rocket hissed up, spilling, green fire that lit the faces around us in a strange underwater way. I felt the sliver of wax in my glove bite my palm. To Ravenshire Hall, his house, his lake, his history, and I with a shard of a signet and a word that began with O and ended perhaps in S. 2 days to pack, 2 days to learn not to tremble, 2 days until I walked into the house where duty echoed. Rain mottled the carriage glass as Ravenshire Hall rose from the parkland, like a stern thought. The lake lay beyond, a dull coin under a pewter sky. Beatrice clapped her hands at the sight of the long facade. How many windows, Charlotte? Imagine the ball we shall have. I imagined water swallowing candlelight. Inside, stone breathed cold. Portraits looked down. Strattons in armor, Strattons in wigs, a child with a hoop that must have been Julian. My stomach folded itself. Honoria came forward, warm despite the draft. Lady, Beatrice, Miss Ashdown, welcome. Mama would have adored to receive you, but she left unsaid the mother who was no longer there to bless or correct. We dispersed to chambers smelling of lavender and starch. The Marchioness's maid unpacked like a general laying out weapons. Mine, borrowed from the house, answered to Tib, and treated me with the careful kindness reserved for gentlewomen who had slid. I carried the blue parcel to Beatrice's dressing table and watched her lift the little reset brooch, pearls and a spray of garnets. Modest for a duchess, and therefore perfect. From his mother, she breathed. He does have a heart, then. In the afternoon, the lawns filled with people like chessmen, gentlemen at archery, ladies by the orangery, the guardsman, Captain Anson, visiting with Lord Kincardine, and looking everywhere but at Beatrice. She looked everywhere but at him. I marked that, and filed it away. Ravenshire found me in the library with an excuse in his hand. Lady Kincardine suggested you're choosing something for Beatrice's edification. Our shelves have little sense of young ladies' taste. I am paid to improve it, I said lightly, tracing the spines. The library was all oak and hush, a smell of paper warmed by old embers. On the mantel, a small ship of carved ivory pitched forever in a storm. Benches in town, he said as though if we discussed novels. He will seek my uncle's old books, investment ledgers, letters. If there is an OS mark, we shall know soon. And the lake? I asked before I could be tactful. His gaze flicked to the window. I avoid it, he said, which was both weakness and strength confessed. Honoria entered, saving us from the weight of that. I am stealing Miss Ashdown for a turn, she announced. We should not let Mama's favorite walk think itself neglected. We went along a flagged corridor where the air smelled of damp stone and beeswax. Alexander is not the only person with a brother, she said, voice low. I remember too. If someone uses Julian against him, find how, and I will cut off the hand that holds the string. Your uncle? I ventured. Oswald smiles with all his teeth, Honoria replied. He has too many for comfort. Evening brought an impromptu display of music in the unfinished ballroom, a room still raw plaster and promise. A hired pianist tested the forte piano. Servants dusted sconces. Beatrice and the Marchioness drifted to inspect where the dais would be. Lord Kincardine admired the floorboards' spring. I lingered at the far edge where moonlight pooled. Ravenshire stood near, a black figure cut from the night. The pianist, bored or brave, began a waltz. Soft, scandalous, irresistible even in a room not you, sanctioned by any patroness. My feet remembered what my life had forgotten. I half turned away and then felt the air shift as he stepped close, not touching. Only our shadows touched and parted, touched again on the pale boards. 3 turns, he murmured. No more. That is 2.5 too many, I said, already swaying. We moved with an invisible thread between us. 1, 2, 3. His hand never quite at my waist, mine never quite in his. The world narrowed to the hush of our steps, the far scrape of a bench, my breath lifting the lace at my throat. At the 3rd turn I stumbled, not from clumsiness, but because a door had opened at the antechamber and a footman stood there, tray in hand, his mouth a small, startled O. He backed out so fast the sconces rattled, and the waltz died on the pianist's keys. We were statues again. Ravenshire stepped away as if distance could rewind time. The Marchioness's fan clicked. Lord Kincardine said something jovial that no one heard. Beatrice peered at us curiously. No guile, no alarm. Honoria came to my side with military swiftness. Tell me the footman's name, she said under her breath. I did not see, I whispered, throat dry. Then we shall find out before he remembers more than he saw. But I knew how little seeing a servant needed to sell a story and how cheaply a tale could be carried to town. Later, as I crossed the gallery to my room, I heard a maid in the stairwell say, Verity writes fastest when the wind is from Derbyshire. I lay awake with that sentence in the dark, like a mouse scratching behind the wainscot. Duty echoed in that house. Boots, bells, the past, and under it, something else tapping to be let out. The morning register arrived crinkling like gossip itself. At breakfast, the Marchioness held the paper, as a surgeon does a scalpel. A blind item, she announced, the 2 words sweet with acid. A certain duke, known for grave demeanor and graver lakes, has been heard to murmur in Firelight a confession fit for a circulating library, addressed not to his bride, but to a certain companion whose lips, if not her virtue, imperil 3 houses. Lanterns, whispers, dominoes. One wonders if the wedding cake must be iced with discretion. Signed, Verity, I, Vale. The silence that followed had weight. Lord Kincardine coughed and discovered a fascination with the kedgeree. Beatrice went as white as the napery, and then, like a brave child, colored prettily and laughed. Silly. No one believes those paragraphs. The Marchioness's gaze slid to me, slow and measuring. People believe what is useful, Beatrice. Ravenshire laid his spoon down. I will not have Miss Ashdown insulted at my own table. His tone had metal. My skin prickled. Then remove her, the Marchioness returned, still smiling. For her own comfort, of course. We shall say she is called to a sick aunt. Honoria's chair scraped. We shall say no such thing. The room split along lines that had been invisible yesterday. Mr. Finch, freshly returned, stood in the doorway with a packet under his arm and the air of a man who has walked into a duel by mistake. Your Grace, he said, bowing. I have what you asked. The Brook Street ledger. Ravenshire rose. If you will excuse me. His glance touched me and moved on as propriety demanded. My heart followed anyway. The Marchioness's lips pursed. Beatrice looked between us with bewildered loyalty. I found the library 15 minutes later under the pretext of choosing sermon literature. Ravenshire and Finch bent over a calf-bound volume. Numbers marched across the page in Mr. Finch's neat, brutal hand. Here, he said, tapping. Entries 5 years running. OS. Assurance. Lady K. Paid through a broker. Sums rise after Julian's death. Lady K. My blood cooled. Kincardine? I whispered. Or Kincardine's lady, Finch said grimly. Either way, the Marchioness is looped through the string. Ravenshire shut the book with a flat thud. No more pretense, he said. I will not marry into blackmail. You will not? Beatrice's voice. She stood at the door, the paper crushed in her hand like a murdered bird. Alexander, you cannot say that here. He drew breath. I can delay. He looked at her with a gentleness that made me ache, for your sake as much as mine. Tears sprang to her eyes. She turned and fled. The Marchioness appeared a heartbeat later, a storm behind a fan. You will do nothing without consulting me. I have done it, he said. I postpone any settlement or contract until my house is clear of extortion. Then clear it of sources, she said, blade bright. Beginning with that girl. Her fan flicked toward me as if I were gnats. Lady Kincardine, Honoria said from the threshold, you are a guest. Do not order my brother's household as if it were a shop. Her gaze cut to me. Miss Ashdown, you will not pack. The Marchioness smiled. A winter thing. You may keep her until London hears out this morning's bile. Then see if even a Stratton's linen comes clean. By afternoon, the house was a hive of whispers. I took refuge in the library when the rain began. The fire banked to embers. Ash scent rising, intimate as a memory. I stood at the hearth to quiet my shaking and saw, among the gray curls, a blackened scrap no bigger than a calling card. On impulse, I fished it out with the poker. The ash broke. A corner survived. The ghost of handwriting legible where the singe had spared it. Assurances secure. OS. Delivery through Montfort. I stared until the letters swam. Montfort. The Marchioness was not merely opportunist. She was conduit. Charlotte. My name behind me, in a voice I was already lost to. I turned. He was there. Rain threading his hair darker. Expression stripped of court clothing. I have told King Cardine. He blustered. I do not care. I will not put you, any of us, under their thumb. How noble, I said, tremor turning to temper because fear must become something. And how convenient, to postpone with a blackmailer to blame. His jaw set. You think I would use this? I think you have been taught all your life to make duty do your sins for you. He flinched, then crossed the space between us in 3 strides and took my face in his hands. The kiss was not courtly. It was winter breaking, ash lifting, a sound in my throat I did not recognize. The hearth breathed warm. My spine found the mantle. His thumb learned the corner of my mouth as if it were a word he had searched for and lost too often. I let it happen, and then placed my palms against his chest and pushed, gently, firmly, until he stopped. Do not make me the hidden proof of your virtue, I said, breathless. If you choose me like a duke, in daylight. If you cannot, then do not. Choose me at all. He closed his eyes as if something fierce inside had been given a name. Then I will choose you in daylight, he said, ragged, or I will choose no one. You have said that to a dozen problems and called it honor, and paid for it, he returned. Allow me one dishonest happiness, and I will make it honest. You cannot, I whispered, but you can make it known. He drew back, straightened, cold entering between us again like proper air. Very well. I looked down at the ash fragment in my hand. There is more, I said, feeling purpose retrieve me from the edge. Montfort is in the channel. OS, your uncle, moves through her. We must find where the money goes once it leaves her hand. He reached and our fingers met over the charred paper. We will, he said, together. A footfall sounded behind us. Measured, smooth. I turned with the scrap clenched like a talisman. Lord Oswald Stratton stood in the doorway, his smile neat as a seam. What a picture, he said mildly. Ashes, embers, and a companion with sooty fingers. You seem very devoted to our hearth, Miss Ashdown. Ash clung to my fingertips when Lord Oswald filled the library doorway like a polite shadow. His smile never reached his eyes. It sat on his face like an ornament from the wrong mantle. What devotion to the great, he observed, stepping inside without invitation. Has my nephew's companion? Ah, forgive me, Lady Kincardine's companion. Found something warming to read? The Lives of the Poets. I lied, sliding the singed scrap behind the poker's crook. Careful, he murmured. Too much Johnson curdles the spirits. He lifted the tongs, studied the embers as if they might opinionate, and replaced them with unnecessary precision. One hates a mess. He left with that small threat, folded in his phrasing, and the room seemed colder. I pressed the ash fragment, delivery through Montfort, flat beneath a sermon in my pocket, and breathed until my hands steadied. That night the house shook itself into gaiety. Candles threw their gold against fresh plastered walls. Fiddles sprang into a country dance that tugged the feet of even the most correct dowagers. Beatrice was a belle of blue silk, bright, frantic, determined to be delighted. Captain Anson, James, though no one called him that aloud, bowed over her hand, his guard's red subdued for the country, his eyes never straying to mine, but sometimes, disastrously, to hers. He was the younger son of the Earl of Wexcombe, respectable, insufficient for a duchess. Yet when they turned together, the air altered. I have seen real feeling disguise itself as propriety, and then betray itself in the space of a breath. It is like the moment when a string goes barely flat and every ear in the room knows it. On the terrace I found Beatrice at last, a little away from the light, her back to a stone urn. The night smelled of wet box and lamp smoke. Charlotte, she whispered, if a person were not the person everyone thinks she is, how would she tell them? Gently, I said. Or with a letter. I am not gentle, she confessed. And Mama opens my letters. She swallowed. I love him. I am not ashamed of it, but I am afraid of the size of it. It feels like a church under my ribs. I pressed her hands. Then we must make a place for your church to stand. How? Her laugh was horridly close to a sob. Alexander is a duke. He needs what I am not. He needs what you are not to be, I said, surprising myself. He needs you not to be his wife. A footfall behind us. Ravenshire had come as if the night itself had invited him. He looked from Beatrice's wet lashes to me, understanding more quickly than I had wanted. "Is it Anson?" he asked with respect that made my heart ache. When she nodded, he bowed as if receiving a dispatch. "Then we must make a way for you that does not leave you bloodied." "Can there be such a way?" Beatrice whispered. "Yes," I said, "if the break appears to be his choosing." I looked to Ravenshire. "If you will shoulder the public wrong, she may keep her private right." He did not blink. "I can do that." "Alexander," Beatrice began, appalled. He lifted a hand. "I will not be the jailer of anyone's happiness." He faced me fully then. "But the cost will be measured. Oswald has arranged loans against our freeholds. He told me so this afternoon with all courtesy. If Montfort's dowry fails, he will press our creditors to call in. The unentailed farms at Bracken lease, the mill at Long Eaton, the quarry lease, all could be seized. He holds the notes or the men who do. Then he must be made to unclench." I thought of the ledger Finch had found, the OS entries, the singed words about delivery through Montfort. If we can prove the blackmail and its channel, Kincardine will fear exposure more than loss. He will allow Beatrice to marry where her heart is safest, so long as her dowry buys him quiet. Beatrice drew back, horrified and hopeful at once. "Do I become coin then, either way?" "No," I said softly. "You become a person making a bargain of your own choosing, rather than a commodity in someone else's." Ravenshire's jaw worked once. "Honoria can speak to Wexcombe. Finch will begin a scheme to replace the Montfort capital with other investors if we must. Slow, bloody work, but possible." His gaze shifted past my shoulder, and his voice dropped. "Oswald is a man who builds webs with doors in them that only he can see. If there is a private ledger, he has brought it. He never leaves his strings far." Nan appeared at my elbow as if summoned by the thought of strings. "Beg pardon, miss. Mrs. Davis says Lord Oswald has his own little room in the East Wing. Says he likes a desk that's not grand to work at. She dusts there when he and the valet go to smoke with the gentleman. There's a drawer he keeps locked. The key ain't on his ring." "How do you know it is locked?" I asked. "Because she tried it," Nan said, perfectly cheerful. "And because Tib says there's a holler in the newel post by the larder stair for old keys. The butler uses it when he loses his temper with them what mislays theirs." Ravenshire did not look at me, which was a kind of looking. "Do not," he said to the air. "I must," I answered the same air. Beatrice caught my sleeve. "Charlotte, if you are found, then it must be worth the finding." I reached for her hand. "Tell your heart to be steady a little longer. We will plait a rope from our thin threads." Inside, the dance turned to a reel. Laughter flew past like bright birds. I went down by the service stairs where the stone sweated in the heat and found the newel post with its discreet cap. My fingers shook as I lifted it. Iron gleamed in the hollow, patient, ridiculous mouthful of keys. Footsteps sounded on the corridor above. Men's boots. Measured. I took one key, the oldest, its teeth worn, and slid the cap back just as a voice I knew too well drifted down the stairwell. "Miss Ashdown," Lord Oswald drawled, conversational as rain. "Do be careful. Houses have ears, and some of them are attached to heads in my employ." The key lay cold and traitorous in my palm. I said nothing, and smiled at the shadows as if they were friends. There is a particular softness to a house at midnight. The clocks nudge time along, the carpets swallow your sins, and the candles you do not light seem to breed their own shadows. I moved down the east wing like a trespassing thought, the borrowed key clamped in my fist. Nan's whispered directions folded under my tongue. Lord Oswald's room surprised me by its plainness. A narrow writing table, a green-shaded lamp, a tray with a single-used teacup, and the lemon slice gone brown at the edge. On the wall, a small hunting print depended crookedly, as if even art did not wholly like his company. The desk had a center drawer with a keyhole like a closed eye. The old key turned as if it had been waiting for that motion all its life. Inside lay a ledger the color of dried blood and a sheaf of folded notes tied with waxed thread. I shut the drawer softly behind my wrist and bent to the book. Numbers marched with soldierly brutality. OS, assurances, Lady K, brokerage through M. The sums grew fat after Julian's death, then settled into regular feedings like a beast that had learned the taste of meat. I turned the page. Names had been clipped short, reduced to initials and cipher, but here and there the hand grew careless. Certain. Delivery to Montfort House. Special withdrawal for the register. Vauxhall. Midnight. A small envelope nestled at the back. Seal broken. The Stratton crest in miniature, only the tail of the S impressed, twinned to the sliver in my glove. I held them together. They mated like lost teeth. My breath sawed. This was not suspicion. It was a map. I slid the envelope into my sleeve, then riffled the tied notes. Receipts from brokers, a bill from a printer in the Strand, promising to place a line discreetly if required. My throat went dry. Another from a man I knew by reputation, as an information monger who sold to gaming hells and scandal sheets alike. Penketh and Sons, advertisements and notices. Verity Vale did not write in a vacuum. She breathed the same air as money. Floorboards murmured in the passage. I chose one leaf, the neatest, the most damning. Assurances secured by Lady K. Disbursements OS. Delivered through Montfort. Ledgers balanced with a dowry schedule. I folded it twice and slid it under the band at my garter, because no gentleman and few ladies would think to look there. The doorknob turned. Light widened along the carpet, and the room filled with Lord Oswald's silhouette. He entered without hurry, as if retrieving a misplaced smile. I had already flattened myself behind the velvet curtain, my feet on the skirting board, my whole body one long prayer. He sat at the desk. The chair creaked his weight as he opened the drawer. Paper whispered. He stilled. For a beat, I thought he could hear my heart. For a second beat, I thought he could see through fabric. Then he rose, crossed to the hearth, and touched the velvet with the back of his hand as if testing for drafts. The curtain breathed around my cheek. He smiled into the nap. I have always admired the efficiency of small things, he remarked to the room. A hinge. A rumor. A woman's place. He let the velvet fall. And the obedience of servants. If you are here, Miss Ashdown, you will discover that devotion cuts two ways. He returned to the desk, pulled a different drawer, and took out a small bell. He did not ring it. He looked at it lovingly, as a man might look at a dog he means to whistle later. Then he put it away again and, with almost painful neatness, locked the center drawer and slipped the key into his waistcoat, as if he had not left it, as if he had always been wise. When he had gone, I slid from the curtain, every muscle clammy with fear. I replaced the ledger where he had left it, turned the old key, and crept into the passage as the clocks agreed on 1 in the morning. Do not run, I told my legs. Shadows run. Women of sense walk. I walked, each step an argument with terror, to the servant's stare. At the bend, Nan waited, face pale, as pastry. Well, she breathed. I have enough to draw blood, I whispered, if his grace will strike. He did not strike at breakfast. The register arrived with the scarlet offense of a fresh ribbon on a throttled throat. Verity's column had sharpened. Our Gothic Duke keeps a fireplace companion, one who knows Ash too well, a modest miss of diminished fortune, initialed CA perhaps, once seen in Vauxhall's dark walk counting lanterns instead. Of virtues. If wedding bells ring, we fear they will toll. The room rippled with hunger. People love to say they do not believe what they wish had not been printed. The Marchioness looked up as I entered, then looked through me, speaking across me to a footman. Remove that second chair. There is no one in that place. It was done with the elegance of murder. Lord Kincardine's mouth tightened, not at the cruelty but at the misstep of showing it. Enough, Honoria said, scraping her chair back hard enough to startle a spaniel. If you cut Miss Ashdown, lady, cut me too. Do not be absurd, the Marchioness replied, which is what tyranny says when someone speaks plain. Ravenshire's gaze found me like a thrown line. I seized it. Now, I said, under the cover of porcelain. You have to speak now. Wait, he answered, the word a blade sheathed. One more day. I have sent Finch to Wexcombe, and to our solicitor. When I speak, I mean to end this, not flare it. One more day will give Verity 2 paragraphs and Oswald 2 plans, I said, hot with the kind of anger that tears. And it gives the world permission to make a story of my name. Your name, he said very softly, will be the one I say, in daylight. Only let me set the table so that when I name you, no one can rise. Honoria's hand touched my sleeve, a second fierce support. I nodded, not because it was enough, but because it was all there was. After breakfast, the Marchioness intercepted me in the gallery where the portraits listened. You have been useful, she said in the tone one uses for a hairpin, but usefulness ends. Pack. You will leave at dawn, with wages to the quarter day. We will say you return to your mother. My mother is dead, I said. Then to your brother, she answered, perfectly pleased with her theme. Pray he behaves better than your father did. She sailed away, satisfied. Her wake smelled of orris and victory. Nan found me not an hour later, cheeks blotched, fists full of her apron. A man from town has come, she blurted, eyes wide. A runner with a paper for you. He says it's urgent. He says it's about your Mr. Thomas. My brother's name struck like a dropped bell. The runner waited below with his hat in his hands and London reins still clinging to his shoulders. I took his sealed note with fingers that would not obey me. The wafer was smeared as if shut in haste. On the outside, in a hand I knew too well from pleas and promises. My name, Charlotte. I broke the seal. The wafer cracked like a knuckle. Thomas's hand came up off the page, his hurried loops, his desperation in the way the lines crowded each other as if the words could not bear to be alone. Lottie, they have me. At a sponging house off Carey Street, a Mr. Nash holds the notes. He says they were purchased for a gentleman's account, OS. I swear I meant to pay once I had luck at Brooks. Only luck is a dog that won't heal. Bring whatever you can. The keeper says if no arrangement is made, I go to the Fleet at week's end. Forgive me. I am not brave. The candle guttered. I folded the paper once, twice. twice to stop my hands shaking and stood so fast the chair tipped. OS coiled in the lamplight like a snake. Oswald Stratton searching my name through my brother's debts the way a ferret searches its way through a warren, neat, patient, remorseless. Honoria came when I sent Tib flying. "We will fetch Finch," she said, already shawled. "He can draw funds. I have my own small settlement independent of the great one." Her jaw had that Stratton set which looks like marble to strangers and like love to those who know it. But dawn outran us. The Marchioness had not slept. Her orders moved with the chill of morning through corridors where fires had not yet taken hold. A footman knocked at my door with my reticule and my hat and wages counted to the farthing. "By Lady Kincardine's command, miss, your coach is ordered for 6, the south gate. I am to say you will not disturb the family." I stared at the coins until they blurred. "Does his grace—" "No." The footman's eyelids did a little dance that servants do when the truth is impolitic. "His grace is out riding, miss." Honoria pushed past him. "He does now," she snapped, furious at the world in general and herself in particular. She pressed a paper into my hand, 3 rapid lines to Mr. Finch in town, an address in Carey Street, a sum authorized. "This will bring Thomas out of the sponging house for a day," she said. "A day can be turned into a life, with luck." "Luck?" I said, and tasted iron. Nan appeared with a small bundle of food, her eyes red. "For the road," she muttered. "And this." She closed my fingers around the tiny sliver of wax from Vauxhall. "You'll not get a second like it if you lose it." I kissed her cheek and felt 12 again, when comfort came as briskly as orders. "Take care of Beatrice," I whispered, and she gave me a look that said she had already set herself that charge without waiting for mine. No one waits for a companion's leave-taking. The house produces what is necessary: bread, coins, a closed gate, then swallows the space she leaves as if it were always meant to be unoccupied. The porter at the South Lodge looked away. The carriage wheels found their own ruts. The oaks along the drive were dark against an early winter sky. Derbyshire ran itself thin, and then London reared up. Soot, cries, the river's breath caught in the lungs of the streets. Carey Street stank of wet rope and old beer. The sponging house was a narrow building with a door that liked to be shut. The keeper was a man who had learned to shrug with his eyelids. "Thomas Ashdown," he said, pleased to have a name to put against a fee. "3rd floor." No shouting. Thomas's face when I opened the door was still mostly boy, though he was 20 and had begun to grow. Whiskers he could not quite own. He flung himself into my arms and shook, laughing horribly. "Lottie, I am filthy and weak and rascally, and I do not deserve you." "We have a day," I said, and the words steadied both of us. Finch's man, sent by Honoria with the note and funds, negotiated briskly. Mr. Nash refused to release Thomas on the strength of promises or pity. He would accept only more coin than we had, and a note of hand that would ruin me if called. "The gentleman's initials were OS?" I asked him, calm like a drawn wire. Nash's lids flickered. He had not meant to say, "Can't speak to that, miss." "You already did." I took out the little envelope I had stolen from Oswald's drawer, with the Stratton crest and the tail of the S. "This seal is from a packet in which I found a bill to your partners at Penketh and Sons for placing notices in the register." He looked as if I had shown him the devil's hair. "My business is legal," he said, sullen. "If you wish to argue, do it with a magistrate." He pushed the paper at Finch's man. "No money, no release." I signed Honoria's note of hand. If ruin must come, let it come with the courtesy of my own signature. By dusk, Thomas lay on a pallet in a room above a chandler's, out of the sponging house for one day purchased with 2 ladies' colony of courage. He slept like a child who has outrun a beating. I stood at the window and watched a boy post bills to a dead wall. The paste steamed in the cold. His fingers left white marks on the brick. I went down after he had gone and pressed my palm to the paper as if the ink could be learned by touch. The Morning Post announced what the register had only hinted. The nuptials of His Grace the Duke of Ravenshire and Lady Beatrice Montfort are appointed for Wednesday next. St. George's, Hanover Square, 11 o'clock, by special license. The letters sat on the page with the serenity of stone. Something in me set hard. So, he had bargained for one more day, and she had bought a week with my absence and his silence. He had not stopped my dismissal. He had not stood in a doorway and said no. I had asked to be chosen in daylight. The daylight had chosen for him. I folded the bill until the date cut my glove. If I could not be believed as a companion, I would be believed as a scandal. If truth must wear a mask to enter a ballroom, let her go to church naked. I wrote to Finch on paper that smelled faintly of tallow. I have 1 leaf and an envelope. You have a ledger. If there is a magistrate who still remembers what justice looks like, bring him. I will be at the north door of St. George's at 10:30. If you cannot come, I shall go alone. CA. Then I sat beside my sleeping brother until dawn, stretched its gray skin over London, and made everything look honest and cold. On Tuesday, a boy pushed a second bill onto the dead wall, Verity's column reprinted in a broadside, the letters grinning. A certain Duke, etc. I tore it down with my hands and left paste under my nails like guilt. On Wednesday, the bells of St. George's began to test their throats, and I pinned the ledger leaf inside my sleeve with 2 crooked stitches and set out to stop a wedding. The church smelled of stone, beeswax, and public expectation. The doors stood open like a judgment. Carriages slotted themselves along Hanover Square in precise discomfort. The Montfort equipage all dove-gray hauteur, the Stratton coach with its black and silver like a pause in music. Women arranged their faces, men arranged their expressions. A cluster of printers' devils lingered across the way, ready to run. Finch met me at the north door with skin the color of old parchment and eyes very much alive. "You are precisely on time," he said. "I have the Brook Street ledger, and a magistrate who would like to be anywhere else but has brought his spectacles. Honoria is within. Wexcombe has come for his son. He says he is here to wish the bride happiness. And his grace?" My voice found hunger where it expected fear. "Already in the vestry," Finch said. "He asked me to tell you." He stopped himself. Good servant to 2 truths. "No, better that you hear him from his own mouth." We slipped into a pew just as the organ began with an agreeable detachment. The congregation rose, heads tilted like flowers following sun. Beatrice entered on her father's arm, pale blue again, mouth brave. The Marchioness walked behind like consequence. Ravenshire stood at the chancel rail with the old composure, Honoria, at his shoulder. Lord Oswald placed himself where he might be seen to be useful without being touched by usefulness. The rector cleared his throat and opened the book. Dearly beloved. His voice had blessed 100 marriages. It sounded as if it believed in all of them. At the line that asks those present to declare impediment, a rustle swept the pews like wind through dry grass. No one speaks. No one ever does. I rose. "Sir," I called, my voice steadier than my knees. "There is impediment." Everything that had been noise was now a listening. The rector stared. The Marchioness's fan went still. You could measure the quiet against its arrested feather. Beatrice's lips parted. Her eyes found me and filled. Lord Oswald turned with pleasant incredulity. "Who is that creature?" "Miss Charlotte Ashdown," Honoria said in a voice that carried an arrow through velvet. "My brother's guest." "Not my guest," the Marchioness snapped. "An impertinent servant." "Impediment," the rector repeated faintly, as if the syllables might prove illusory if said twice. I stepped into the aisle. My boots whispered on the stone. Finch stood with me. Behind us, a small, nervous man with a white neckcloth clutched his hat. Our magistrate, tucking his mouth into a shape of courage. "Speak, miss," he said, half to me, half to his own. Conscience. I untied my sleeve with fingers that had not yet learned how to betray me. I hold in my hand a leaf from a ledger kept by Lord Oswald Stratton. I lifted the paper. The church's light slid through it, showing the watermark, Montrose & Co., like a saint in a window. It records assurances secured by Lady Kincardine, disbursements by O.S., and delivery through Montfort House, payments that rise immediately after the death of Lord Julian. Stratton. Murmurs broke like dropped glass. I have also this. I held up the tiny sliver of wax. The tail from a signet used to seal threats delivered among Lady Beatrice's invitations. The fragment matches an envelope found with the ledger. I showed the envelope. The crest flashed, that silent S biting the wax. "Forgery," the Marchioness said crisply, "and female industriousness." "Here," Finch said, calm as winter, offering the Brook Street ledger to the magistrate. Entries corresponding in date and sum. The broker's receipts fold into payments to Penketh and Sons for notices and advertisements in a certain newspaper column. The hand that pays for those notices is O.S.'s. Penketh's bill, his name printed at the top like a confession, rustled as the magistrate read. He licked his finger, a nervous habit, and turned the page. "This looks like proof enough to open a formal inquiry," he said, "and proof enough to stop a marriage until that inquiry is made, if those at this rail so choose." All eyes shifted to the man at the rail. Ravenshire had not moved when I rose. He moved now. He took one step back from the chancel, one step forward toward the world, and in those 2 motions divided his life. "I choose," he said clear. "I cannot, notwithstanding, proceed." The sound the church made then was not a sound I had heard before. Tied taking breath. The rector froze with his hand at the page. The Marchioness said very low, "You will regret this all your life." "I hope to," he replied and meant it. Beatrice's bouquet trembled. A single white flower fell. Captain Anson, James, stood half hidden by a pillar. He took one involuntary step, stopped himself out of respect for the world, then could not help the next step. Wexcombe's mouth tightened, then eased. He had done all, the numbers a father can do in an evening. Lord Oswald smiled like a man who has already bought all the exits. A privacy of griefs paraded, he murmured. How very literary. Save your literature for the magistrate, Honoria said, and her eyes shone with a fury that would not wait for any poet. The Marchioness turned on her daughter with a kind of strangled grace. You will stand, Beatrice. You will be high and deaf. Beatrice lifted her chin. It was a small motion that remade her. No, Mama. She looked at Ravenshire with gratitude and something like apology. I cannot be what you need. And what do you need? The Marchioness demanded, already calculating fresh uses for whatever answer came. Permission, Beatrice said, and turned, slowly, elegantly, to where Captain Anson stood, unable now to do anything but meet her halfway. They did not touch. The guardrails of the world still held, but the room altered so thoroughly that the flowers on the altar seemed to grow a degree brighter. I will not be extorted, Ravenshire said into the hush that followed, and let the whole church hear it. He faced Oswald fully. Not by you. Not with my brother's name or anyone else's. If you have more letters, bring them. They will be read in daylight. Oswald's smile slipped a fraction, the way a card will slip when a cheat's hand has grown too steady. Grand words, he said. Small purse. Not so small as you hope, Finch murmured, and I saw the quiet gleam in his eye that meant numbers had been arranged overnight into a rampart. Behind him, a pair of men I did not know caught Oswald's face in a new triangle, solicitor, magistrate, and consequence forming. The rector shut his book softly. Bells murmured as if uncertain whether to sing or toll. Outside, the printer's boys had stopped pretending they were not listening. Ravenshire looked at me across a church full of witnesses, as if the crowd were a thin veil. Miss Ashdown, he said, and the courteous title broke and reformed into something tender. You asked to be chosen in daylight. He turned so London could not mistake him. I choose Charlotte Ashdown. I will seek a special license today, if she will have me. My heart sounded like a door struck open by wind. The Marchioness drew breath to scorch. Verity Vale somewhere wet a pen like a dagger. Beatrice laughed through tears. James's hand opened as if catching light. Will you? Ravenshire asked, holding out not his hand, too little, but his whole name. The church leaned toward me. For a beat, I saw everything that would follow. Ridicule, ballads, respect that would come slow and suspicious, the work of repairing a house and a man and a self. I saw also a hearth, and the words that had once been ruin turned into a promise. I opened my mouth to say yes, and the great west door boomed as someone flung it wide, cold air rushing down the nave like reckoning. Cold came down the nave as the west door crashed back, and with it a flurry of ink-stained men, hatless and astonished, propelled by Honoria's will and Finch's arrangements. At their center shuffled a narrow fellow with a printer's pallor and a conscience that had begun to itch. Mr. Penketh, Finch said, pleasantly lethal. The magistrate is present. You may repeat what you told me in the Strand. Penketh twisted his cap and stared at Oswald as a parish boy stares at the devil in a window. Beg pardon, my lord. The notices, the hints in the register, they was paid for regular out of your account. I didn't know they'd be used against a lady. Well, against several. The magistrate saw. Spectacles flashed. Lord Oswald Stratton, you will attend chambers this afternoon to answer charges of blackmail and conspiracy to defame, pending further inquiry. You will not leave town. Oswald's lips thinned. For the first time, he looked like a man measuring doors and finding them narrower than memory. I shall attend, he said, and his gaze brushed me like a promise made of ash. The world held its breath. Then Ravenshire turned back to me, and everyone remembered the present tense. Will you? He asked again, and the light from the clear story made a kind of halo of dust around his dark hair, which seemed wickedly appropriate. Yes, I said, because there is a mercy in saying the word that answers the one you have been asked for all your life. There was no cheer. This was not a play. There was a release, as when a carriage finally gives to the push and rolls and everyone stands, straighter. Beatrice laughed and cried together, and God bless him. Captain Anson bowed to her father as if asking for a dance. The rector closed one book and opened another, blinking as if changing spectacles. A special license may be procured, he murmured, already recalculating. The Marchioness folded her fan very slowly, as if she meant to hear that sound for a long while. We did not marry that morning. We walked out into the square as if leaving a storm cellar to find the sky rinsed clean and the printer's devils scattered like sparrows. By dusk, Finch had placed before us the thick, impersonal paper of a special license. By morning, Honoria had arranged a small ceremony in the chapel at Ravenshire Hall. No trumpets, no broadside, only stone and vows and a window where a bee blundered and could not quite find up. Thomas stood at the back, borrowed coat too large, jaw set with the courage of the recently reprieved. I am to work for Mr. Finch, he told me afterward, proud as a herald. He says I am to learn columns instead of cards. He squeezed my hands. Lottie, I am sorry for everything that taught you how to be brave. Beatrice, after a scene that shook her house and steadied her, accepted a very quiet proposal from Captain Anson with Lord Wexcombe's blessing and her mother's reluctant mathematics. We shall be talked of, she said to me, eyes bright, but for once I do not mind the talk. Verity Vale's next paragraph, pliant as any paid tongue, praised candor, that rarest of ton virtues, by which even dukes grow more handsome. Oswald did not go to prison that week. Great men do not fall like rookies at Skittles. But his circle of movement shrank. The magistrate's inquiry pried his drawers open in town. Finch's plan, sober as oatmeal and twice as sustaining, brought in new investors for the mill and quarry, nudged the bank into patience, and quietly separated those parts of the estate Oswald had tied to his own convenience. Honoria advanced a portion of her separate settlement with a light that was not lightness. It was meant to keep me free, she said. It keeps us all free. The Marchioness retreated into a dignity she wore like armor. She did not call on me. London did. Lady Jersey looked me over with relish at Almack's and inclined her head. Waltz, she permitted, as if christening a ship. That first dance as a wife, my hand in his, my name on his mouth, was not desertion from duty, but a conscription into it, which is the only kind of romance that survives daylight. We made mistakes with ceremony and accuracy. I forgot to curtsy to a duchess who had once not looked at me at all. He forgot for a week to sleep past dawn. We learned. We argued in whispers and then in words. He taught me the accounts of Bracken Lees. I taught him where the servants' corridor hears the dining room and why to lower his voice there. We visited Thomas at Mr. Finch's desk and set a tally of repayment that was not a noose. We wrote to Madame Celeste and sent Nan silk enough to make mischief with. When autumn drew the smell of apples into the halls and the first fires were laid, we stood in the Ravenshire library where ink and ash had once conspired, and the grate breathed warm like a creature tamed. He put his hand on the mantel where my back had once been and smiled without defense. Charlotte, he said in that low timbre that had altered the world and then mended it, your lips are my ruin. I laughed, the kind of laugh that has slept beside a vow. Then, your grace, at last we agree what ruin is. Not loss, he said, and touched my mouth as if completing a sentence. Redemption. Outside, the lake lay black and honest under a cold moon. We walked to it later, because fugitive things must sometimes be faced, and he did not flinch when the path narrowed. He told me about Julian without the wire of guilt, and I told him about the night I had knocked the tongs and thought I had toppled the world. The water kept its counsel. We did not pay it grief to keep ours. At Christmastide, toasts were given at a dozen tables where our names had been spat before. To candor, someone said. To courage, said someone else. To that companion, said Honoria, lifting her glass to me with a grin that looked like her brother's. And him, with his hand over mine, heat steady as a hearth. When the company thinned and the house remembered how to be quiet, we went back to the library fire. He kissed me until the ash settled, and the clock forgot itself, and in that bright hush I understood the only ruin I had ever wanted, the kind that undoes a lonely life and builds a better one from its stones.